Okay, welcome everybody. It's great to have you here. Some people have been with us for the all three so far of this series, and there are two more to come. And some of you are new, and welcome back to those who are here. And if you've missed any and you want to catch up with the videos, just drop me a note. There is a link to my email that'll pop up on one of Solange's slides. Solange, you want to give me the next slide, please? So we will keep it to 30 minutes, followed by a Q&A. Solange has promised. And this is a 5-part series. And we're doing it because we get so many questions and people talking to us about the role of DE&I about in all kinds of ways, but specifically about stakeholders. So this is a DE&I and stakeholders series. We're providing because a lot of people seem to be interested. Number 4, which is the next one, will be on May 31st at 2 p.m. Eastern. And it will be about communities as stakeholders. And number 5 is about strategic partners as stakeholders. And you will, if you're here today, you will be getting an invitation to those. HC Moneyball is a company that provides analytics to corporations and to the people within corporations. And specifically, we provide reports that are very easy to generate for you to generate because you don't have to do very much. And they are about all kinds of aspects like DE&I. It's a DE&I audit report. We have a materiality audit report, and there are others. This is not selling. So if you're interested, just drop me a note. Excuse me. Feel free to drop a question in the chat at any time. Pablo will be monitoring the chat, and you'll, as I said earlier, you'll see how to reach us in a couple of Solange's slides. So I will turn it over to Solange. Don't hesitate to drop a note to any of us if you have any questions. Solange?
Thank you, Joseph, and thank you, Pablo, for organizing. So here's a little snapshot of me. I'm not going to go through everything because I'm exhausted just looking at what my list is. But I did want to highlight that I recently joined the International Standards Organization. I'm a member of the Technical Committee 260, which deals with all human capital standards. And I'm specifically working on the ISO 3414 standard on human capital governance and reporting. That standard is hitting its 5-year mark. And it's time to redesign the standard. 5 years ago, no one was talking about human capital disclosures, not the SEC, not EFRAG, not the European Union. Nobody was the World Economic Forum or Davos. No one was talking about it. So it's time to update that standard, modernize it, and make it more applicable for all organizations across the world. So I'm really excited to be part of that working group. And hopefully we'll modernize the standard so it's more relevant for everybody. So yay. You know, our literary agent and our publisher will smash me if I don't mention the book. So there's a QR code there. If you haven't gotten the book yet, I'm going to ask you to please purchase the book. There's a lot of value in the book. We're hearing from people that is really readable, so it's not like your normal human capital book. So, you know, give us a shout out and buy the book. And also subscribe to our newsletter. If you're not on our list yet, you can go to www.humanizinghumancapital.com. That's the book website, and then just sign up for our newsletter. We're doing these once a month, and we're not only pushing out our thought leadership around human capital analytics and humanizing human capital, but highlighting other things that are in the news that are relevant and important for you to know in the intersection between human capital management and human capital data analytics. Okay, enough advertisements. As Joseph said, this is a 5-part series. We talked about the investors as a stakeholder. We talked about employees as stakeholders in the last session in February. Today, we're going to be talking about consumers or customers, and how really critical they are in terms of your business model and your business success, and the things that they're looking for in terms of DE&I and other human capital indicators. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. The next 2 are going to be around communities as a stakeholder, and lastly, strategic partners as a stakeholder. So you've got a preview. Hopefully you'll sign up for those as well. Again, if you know me, you know I'm all about the beat. I'm all about the data. You can't change and you can't monitor what you're not measuring. And so, data is so important in creating actionable business insights, really important in showing your progress to your stakeholders, to your boss, to your boards. Human capital, the function of human capital is really undergoing a transformation. If you are not speaking a financial language or a data language, you're gonna fall behind, because every other function in the organization now speaks that financial language. And the only way to do that is to transform your human capital information, and you've got lots of it, into meaningful data-driven insights. We're focusing on DE&I because that's a big issue, but you can gain insights about any human capital program in your organization. You just need to figure out how to transform your information into data, and then how to correlate that data to financial outcomes and create. I've got Patty Phillips in the room, so I want to be careful about overreaching, because she's also an expert in human capital ROI. But that's the idea, is to understand the return on investment in your human capital programs, and then correlate those to sustainable business outcomes to demonstrate how critical human capital is as a driver of economic value creation for your organizations. And if you don't think it's important, I invite you to figure out how much money is allocated of your total expense to human capital. If it's more than 50%, then human capital is a key driver of value creation for your organization, and you need to play that important role of managing that to its optimization. So today we're going to be talking about making the case to your customer. And I'm going to be basing today's short conversation, on a couple of conference board reports that were created in 2022. And I'm going to give you the links to those reports. They are available in the public domain, so I'm just giving you the links so that you can access them. But the fundamental premise of the conference board findings is really, really interesting. The first is that the corporate sector is more trusted than other institutions in terms of the reliability and validity of the data that they're providing their stakeholders, more than governmental information. So it's incumbent upon corporations to fill that role in terms of creating the right kind of data, making sure that data is accurate, and then communicating that data, because the users of that data are actually trusting corporations more than they're trusting other sources of data today. So we have a responsibility for not only making sure we calculate and create the right data and the right insights, but that we actually communicate that, because the stakeholders are looking to corporations for that information. People are looking to businesses to address societal issues. And we've seen this happen as a trend over time. This isn't something that's new. This has been building over the last couple of decades, as the government becomes less accountable for monitoring performance in terms of societal impact, companies are taking that up. So businesses are actually taking up more of the accountability and responsibility for impacting positive societal changes. So it's not just that people are trusting companies more, they're also looking to companies for making these societal changes, for bettering society. And to that end, businesses need to understand the expectation of their customers and their employees related to societal issues. So those are the three sort of fundamental premises that underlie the conference board research and the findings that they had. So this is the first report called Sustainability Features That Sway U.S. Consumers Are Changing. And if you remember, about maybe a decade ago, what consumers really wanted to understand was companies' climate impact or environmental footprint. And consumers really demanded that organizations become transparent about how their organizations, their operations are impacting climate. If you remember, there was something called the Green Movement. You might also remember a lot of kerfuffle around carbon, carbon credits and carbon footprint. And consumers were actually demanding that organizations disclose information about their impact on the environment. It was sort of the height of the CSR, the corporate social responsibility movement. And what happened was companies responded. And most organizations, most large organizations, most organizations that create consumer products, they actually disclose about their carbon footprint. They disclose information about their environmental impact. They disclose information about the products that they create and their energy use, right? So we had the Energy Star. And what happened was consumers stopped demanding that kind of information because companies were readily disclosing it. So the issue got disappeared because companies were disclosing. Now what we're finding is that consumers are demanding information about human capital performance. And the reason that they care about it is twofold. One is because there's a break from the traditional model where human capital or HR policies, HR programs were considered to be a trade secret, a competitive advantage, and held very close to the vest. That's no longer the case anymore. There are increasing demands, as we saw in the last two webinars, from investors and from employees to really understand how companies treat their workforce. We are seeing this reflected in consumers' request, consumers' demand. So when the conference board sent out the survey to 1,900 US adults, with the conference board and the Harris Poll Sustainability Survey, this is what they found. The top 3 things that consumers care about are fair prices, which they will always care about, right? Price is always the number one influencer in purchase intent. But the second 2 are really, really surprising. Fair labor conditions and fair wages. And I think that that's really fascinating. 10 years ago, or maybe even more, 20 years ago, the top 3 for consumers were price, customer service, and product attribute. So you can see how the consumers have shifted their attention away from the product and more about accountability by the organizations that are creating those products. So fair prices, fair labor condition, and fair wages. And if you go down to the 12th most important thing is gender, racial, LGBTQ, and equity in the workplace. So you can see that, you know, the environmental stuff hasn't gone away. It's just gotten further down on the list: natural resources, pollution, climate change. And what's really the focus of consumers is how companies are treating employees. I have a theory about this. I can't tell you whether or not it's true or not true. My theory is consumers are employees. And so they have a lot of empathy. They want to make sure that organizations that are producing the products that they purchase are treating their employees the way they as an employee would want to be treated. And so they want to support organizations that treat employees well. So if you're an organization that has B2B or B2C, you probably should be thinking about how to disclose your performance related to fair labor conditions and fair wages and equity in the workplace, LGBTQ, race and gender publicly, so that your consumers actually understand that you have a policy, that you're working towards fulfilling that policy, and that you are paying attention to the things that are important to your consumers. So hopefully this isn't news that's going to make you fall off your chair, but news that will really make you think about how to reframe not only how you're managing human capital, but how you're communicating that to the outside world. So that's one really important finding from this conference board report. To drill down into it a little bit more, we're seeing who in the consuming population is really sensitive to this. And yeah, guess who? It's the Gen Zs and the millennials. And guess what? They make up more than 50% of the consuming population. So this is not, oh, let's pay attention to a small part of our consumers. This is, let's pay attention to the needs of the majority of our consumers. We also see that Black or African-American and Hispanic score really high in terms of what influences their purchasing decisions. You know, whites are in there too. They're not as high, they're not as concerned. And then we can also see, you know, male, female, income, urbanicity, and political leaning, right? So you have sort of a landscape of who makes up that population that cares about these top three, or the workplace conditions and pay equity. From the second report that was done over that summer, we wanted to understand the issues that are really focused on human capital. So this report is called Equitable Pay and Healthcare Top Consumers Wish List for Corporate Social Initiatives. They're hot links again, they're hot links. So when you get the presentation, you can just click on them and you'll get to the report. But again, here are the top three issues: pay people fairly, irrespective of their culture and background, provide equal access to all groups for healthcare. Dropping down a little bit, improve the diversity and inclusivity of the workforce, provide equal access to all groups to education. That could be public education or corporate education, and then provide childcare at work. Those are the issues that really address human capital programs. And then the way to read this is to look at the comparison between the the medium blue. Well, the dark blue shows you how important the issue is. The medium blue and the light blue tell you whether or not there's a gap, right? So it's 53% of the participants said pay people fairly is really important, right? And there's a gap between how satisfied consumers are with the policies that companies disclose versus the progress or the actions that companies are taking against those policies. So here's another shift. It's not just good enough for an organization to say, this is our policy and this is what we intend to do. The movement now, the demand for information now is more around accountability. So we've gone from performative to accountable. And I think that that's really important, because it's not just good enough to say this is what we intend to do. Just as in the case with the employees, remember I said employees are like from Missouri. They want companies to show them, not tell them, to show me how you've treated others in your organization that look like me in terms of pay, opportunity, training, development, performance, right? All of those things that are important to employees. Consumers are also from Missouri. They don't want you simply to say, this is our point of view on what we're going to do for our employees. The consumers want to see accountability and see action and continual improvement in these areas. So again, it's not just good enough to come up with a great policy. You have to come up with a way to operationalize that policy, to get results from those policies. So companies are doing okay because the gaps in these areas aren't huge, but there are gaps, which means that there isn't enough information to prove that your companies are doing the right thing, to satisfy the consumer so that they will purchase your products, so that your company can be sustainable and profitable. Okay, that's sort of the causal chain. So how do you make your case to your management? How do you make your case to your consumers? You need to quantify impact. And for those of you that know me, you know that I'm not just going to do a webinar and not give you a lot of resources to look at. So that's the educator in me coming out. Here's your slide. So how does DE&I and customers drive enterprise level performance? So there's a lot of academic literature. There's a lot of practitioner literature out there. And the first bullet is the same bullet that you saw in the last presentation, because I think it is relevant. Diverse workforces achieve 3 important outcomes: fostering creativity, developing positive reputations, and greater financial performance for the organization. And you have a hot link to a reference below. Research shows that organizations with higher level of diversity perform better. Both academic and practitioner studies indicate that business leaders are starting to think more broadly about DE&I as a business imperative. And an abundance of studies since the early 2000s show that there is a relationship between diverse workforces and enhanced sales and firm performance. And I give you a whole bunch of articles here: Meta, Trevin, Zagrebs, another by Trevin, Leonard, and I can't say this guy's name, Guanjian. So you can look at those articles if you want to see a more academic evidence of the relationship between diversity and brand enhancement, so that generates better market share, sales in an organization, and ultimately firm performance. And just to sort of nail this concept home, I came up with this little causal model here. We think, again, this is not tested, although this would be a great research model for somebody, that improvements in diversity in the organization will improve the customer's purchase intent, which then drives better sales, which then generates better market share and more profitability. And we have seen the relationship in the academic literature between some of these arrows, but not as this causal chain. So if there are any researchers out there that want to take this up, happy to participate, but I'm doing 4 research projects right now, so I can't initiate another one. That if you want to partner with me, I'd love to hear from you. So we think that there's a relationship between the Simpson Diversity Index and customer purchase intent, as indicated by the Conference Board research, and the rest is sort of, common sense to conclude that if your customer purchase intent or repurchase intent goes up, your sales goes up. So the question is, are you willing to risk your brand or your net promoter score by not paying attention to what customers want? And what they want is to understand, to have transparency in the way that your organization or organizations in general are treating their workforce, either in pay equity, in opportunities, in diversity, in LGBTQ disability programs, and the like. So we think the best way to start this is to actually do a little audit. We're offering this DE&I audit report. We do about 70 analytics, creating about 40 dashboards. We benchmark your organization to all competitors in the same SIC code or NAICS code. And we can also do materiality analysis on whether or not your DE&I is actually driving better financial outcomes for your organization. Depending on the organization, we could probably benchmark your NPS performance over time, and also look at your NPS and your market share compared to the general level of your competitors in your industry group. Reach out to us, which is the next slide. You can schedule a meeting by going to that bit.ly HC Moneyball site. You can, it's set up for Joseph, but if you request me, I'm happy to meet with you. You can write to Joseph. You can connect with me at LinkedIn and either write to me directly or write to me through LinkedIn. Happy to support your organization. Happy to support you in being successful in managing human capital in a way that actually drives quantifiable economic value attributable to HR, which is, my whole jam. Ready to take questions. Hey, I managed to do that in less than 30 minutes. Yay me.
You did great, Solange. I know that Christian had a question. Yes, Christian Lecomte.
Okay.
He's asking, how do you interpret the recent backlash in response to progressive organizations promoting the transgender agenda and woke agenda? Nike, Budweiser, risk of alienating part of the conservative consumer base?
Yeah, and Christian, thank you for participating today. Christian and I had a very nice conversation on Monday or Tuesday, can't even remember today, but thank you. It is a really, really interesting question. I think, I don't want to get political, but it turns out being very political. And as you saw in the slide, the Democrats versus the GOP versus the Republicans have very different levels of sensitivity to these kinds of issues. I think, so I've actually been thinking about this a lot, and I think that the reason that political pundits can't predict what's going to happen anymore is because respondents aren't responding honestly. I think there's a lot of social desirability that's happening in the world, and people answer questions based on what they think the questioner wants to hear. But in private, they are probably, and this is my hope because I'm an optimist, are probably not tolerant of bullying, of fascism, of racism, of ageism. I think for the most part, people are not isms, right? And I think that in the aggregate, the consuming population cares more about well-being than they do about politics. And, if I heard somebody give me that answer, I'm not sure that I would be so satisfied. But I don't think that there is an answer. I think organizations need to do the right thing, and the right thing is to not be influenced by the small percent of the population that is an ism, or an ist, a racist, a bigot, right, an ageist. And I think in general, we need to have a more inclusive approach, and hopefully businesses will think about that. Anything else? Any other questions?
Let's see, Solange, I'm putting for everybody the next, Solange, Pablo, I'm sorry, will you check and see if there are any questions there?
Ed is asking if we have the recording of the previous sessions. Yes, Ed, you can reach out to me or Joseph, and we will share the links with you.
Yeah, I'm putting number 4 in the chat right now, so everybody can have that. And Solange, I've been asked this question several times because as you fessed up, you're driven by the data. So if anybody's participating here, I was asked this question just yesterday. How do I get started? What do I do if I'm not now measuring and evaluating all the stuff you're talking about?
It's an excellent question. It's very hard to boil the ocean. Pick the issue that you believe is key critical in your organization. Is it DE&I? Is it retention? Is it recruiting effectiveness? Is it performance management? Is it mobility? And it might be a combination of all of those things, but you got to prioritize. Pick one and start thinking about data that you already have in the organization that you can use to generate some insights. The beauty of HR is not only that we have a richness of data, but we have longitudinal data. We can measure what's happened in the organization over time. And that's where the narrative comes from. That's where your insights come from. What's happened over time, and how can we segment our employee population to understand what's going on with selected segments? Because it might not be a problem across the board. It might be a problem with one team in your company, like IT or operations, or it might be one segment of your population, like women or baby boomers, right? So that's the beauty of data analytics, is it helps us create order out of chaos. And then pick one topic that you think is really important. Maybe if you think Patty's already gone, maybe it's learning and development. Yeah. Or it's DE&I. Pick one place where you can sort of put your flag in the sand and start thinking about, how can I correlate the performance that we're seeing in this area to other outcomes in HR. It doesn't have to be financial, but the financial one is the one that's going to be the most compelling, because then you can go to your leadership and say, I think I can save us a couple of $1 million if we solve this problem. And when you go to leadership with a solution that's quantifiable, they will more than likely listen to you than if you go to them and say, we have a culture problem. Nobody knows how to solve that. But if you can, reinterpret the problem into something that's quantifiable and measurable, and you can show performance in the past, right? That's why you want your longitudinal data. Then that helps. So start with one area that you think is important. There's a question from Tayaba, which is, as a consultant or researcher, what is your opinion about DE&I in bringing more women into the boardroom, and how? Yay, perfect question. So Tayaba, I don't know if you know this, but my PhD is in corporate governance. And I also served on public company boards. And I am still part of the 30% Coalition. I used to be on their board. I'm now just a member. Yes, it is so important to bring more women into the boardroom. The how is a little bit more difficult. If you are interested in building your skill to be considered for a boardroom position, there are lots of professional associations out there. Look at Athena Alliance. That's a good one to start. They do a lot of programs for women who are interested in board positions. They have some training programs. Mark Pfister also has a training program, and you can find his website. I think it's called Mark Pfister and Associates. He also wrote a book whose name I
It
don't.
spells P as in Peter, F as in Frank, I-S-T-E-R. Odd spelling.
And I highly recommend that you join the 30% Coalition or 2020 Women. And I think there's another association, I think that it's either renamed itself to 50-50 Women. There are lots of professional associations that will help you gain some insights about women and minority board service. And thank you, Jervis. Chief is another great women's board representation group. So when you get into that community, you'll see there are lots of resources out there. How do we address ageism in the workplace? All senior leaders are 65 plus and completely disconnected. Well, I'm almost 65. I don't feel like I'm disconnected. At what point do leaders become too old to where they don't understand or connect with the consumer base? Okay, so I've got two responses to that. One is you're being a little ageist by assuming that anyone that's over 65 is not connected, because I know a lot of 45-year-olds that are not connected. So that's the first thing. And second, I do agree that we need to have a level of sensitivity, not just related to age, but related to competencies and abilities. And we shouldn't just assume that just because someone is young, they're able, or because they're old, they're disabled or unable. But I also hear how frustrated you are that the baby boomers, because those are the 65-year-olds and up, may feel a little disenfranchised from the rest of the workforce in terms of generational empathy. And I think it's a two-way street. I think that the younger people need to coach and mentor the older people, and the older people need to coach and mentor the younger people. We just need to find the right tone to speak to one another in a way that makes a contribution. So if there's somebody in your life or in your career that's 65 and older that you feel is out of touch, you might gently start a conversation with them and say, I'd like to learn from you, and I'd like for you to learn from me. And you'll be amazed at how the conversation might really blossom into a great relationship. Okay.
It looks like we don't have any more questions, 277 registrants, no more questions. We will, I've already put in the chat, and you also will have it in the slide deck when you get it, the date and title for the next session. We hope you'll join us there. Don't remember that slide that Solange, don't forget rather, that slide that Solange just had up showed where you can get in touch with any or all of us. If you reach one of us and you want to talk to one of the other of us, we will arrange that. Or if you want to talk with us, one of the specialists on our team, we can arrange that as well. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you again to everybody who's back for another session. And for those of you who have just joined us, don't forget to let me know if you want to see the video and slides from previous sessions.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Solange.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.